We love our traditions, right? Lauren's family yesterday, we just had, every year we have a real special meal that we all look forward to, which includes Italian pastries for dessert, right? All right, you get that sugar rush, and then you get the food coma right after this. And the goal is to clear out the dishes in between, the peak and the valley, right? So Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
We love being here. We love Christmas at Faith Community Church. It's so special for us. We love the family. We love the tradition. Most of all, we like the Christ in Christmas. That's why we're here this morning. So, if you think about it, the last few years have been a little crazy. We had a pandemic where we didn't know what to expect. And so we all pivoted to the point that we got dizzy. We had a super spreader Christmas where we thought Christmas was going to go viral with the family, and it did. Right? We all recovered. And now we're going into a post-pandemic Christmas where we think, we're going to expect the new normal. But we don't know what that new normal is, so we're just going to kind of navigate and do the best that we can. So what we thought we would do with this series is we'd help you unpack Christmas. We would help you unpack your emotions. We'd help you unpack the inevitable conflict that comes when families get together and your expectations. Because I'm a guy who thinks your expectations define your experience. What you expect to happen will define your experience. Because if it happens, you feel great, and when it doesn't, well, maybe you feel like these photos. You know that thing where you just expect you want to have that perfect picture with your kids and Santa Claus, and that's what you paid your money for, right? You're thinking, I waited in line this long and paid all that money for this. Or you expect, that expectation, if a little is good, then a lot must be even better. Woo! That looks like a Christmas blob. The thought in my head is like, who thought that was a good idea? You know what I mean? Or that expectation is like, we've had the Christmas presents and everyone should be happy. Just one picture. We're going to dress up in just one picture. Doesn't quite communicate what we expected for Christmas, right? Or maybe at the end of the pandemic, 2020 was coming to a close, and for you, your expectations were fully met. 2020 was a big old dumpster fire. You were looking for 2021, and that didn't quite meet your expectations either. So now at 22, you're not sure what to expect. Expectations define experience. So that's what we'll talk about this morning. When we approach Christmas with reasonable expectations, right, it's easier to center on Christ and find the blessings that are available. So whether you're here in the building or online church, great to have you with us this morning. We want to talk about how you can have reasonable expectations so that you can discover Christ and experience his blessings for you this Christmas. And to do that, I'm going to talk about a chaotic birth experience. I'm going to talk about grilling. Always loved grilling. And we're going to talk about a prison letter. Read from a prison letter, all right? So God, I want to give you this morning. Lord, I'm praying that your Spirit sweeping through this room like you have through worship, penetrating all the way through our technology into homes, Father, influencing people here in Hopkinton and Framingham, throughout the Metro West, even in places around the country and the world, Lord. May your Spirit say something this morning that changes lives. Because, Father, I'm giving you this time. This is yours. I love you. I trust you. I want people to walk from this room amazed at what you've done through Jesus and what's available to them, both today, Lord, through eternity. May you be blessed. Amen. So it's Christmas time. We'd like to talk about Mary and Joseph. Now, you would expect that if you're going to partner with God to bring the Son of God into the world, you might get a hall pass on some of life's difficulties. I mean, after all, you're carrying the Son of God. So how did it work out? Let's take a look at the Christmas story. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. And this was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. Yay! During the final trimester of my wife's pregnancy, the government has this unreasonable demand that creates chaos in the world and raises our taxes, because there's only two reasons they would do a census. What they did is they would tax every male that lived in the region. So they would want to get an accurate read of the population. Not that taxes would go down, but that taxes would go up, as well as conscription. They would want to know how many guys there were in the region in case they went to war. Those would be the people that they would pull on. So here you are, you're trying to navigate through this difficult pregnancy, and you've got the government that's now laid this harsh demand upon you. Everyone went to their own town to register, so Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. That's a 90-mile journey. It's not an easy journey in that day. Most likely Joseph walked 90 miles through mountainous area, through valleys, across wilderness area in the time when there was always the danger of thieves and bandits on the road. And he went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. We don't really know why he took Mary. He didn't have to. He had to go to Bethlehem. One of the ideas that people have is that it was getting difficult for Mary. She had gone to see her cousin Elizabeth. She was pregnant. Everyone knew that they hadn't been married yet. And so they were getting together, and it looked like they had jumped the gun in a really conservative social environment. You might be criticized for that. And so maybe he took Mary along just to get her out of the community. Whatever the reason, now we've got Mary, 90 miles in the same arduous journey as Joseph, jostling along, fully pregnant. She had to be in her 9th month at this point. Whether she was walking, which was highly possible, or she might have ridden on a donkey, we don't know. There's no mention of the donkey in the story. We just insert that in there because we can't imagine her walking 90 miles, but having been to different places in the world. We know plenty of stories of women in their last month who are walking a long journey to a clinic trying to not give birth. And while they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. Of course, right? Here you are in a town that's strange to you, where maybe Joseph had some extended family. We don't know. He came out of the Bethlehem area, so there might have been some connections in that area. And she certainly was cut off from her immediate family. And she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. And they wrapped him in cloth, placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. And so here they are in this strange place, having to find a safe place, an environment, as she's gone. Now the contractions, a very inconvenient birth. Of course, it comes after a moment like this, and when the Son of God comes into the world, they find a food trough to put him in. Doesn't quite meet our expectations, does it? I mean, think of all of that. A government with difficult demands, and that's going to involve you having to make a long, arduous, and dangerous journey to get into a crowded town and to have to fight to be able to find a place to stay, a place that has some room available somewhere for you, and you end up in an area where the animals are, trying in a very dangerous world to give birth to a child, not into the most septic, or not in the most clean environment, and then you put the baby into a food trough. Well, that's not what you expect for the Son of God. Because what happens is we set these expectations, and when they're not met, now we have to choose how to respond. What do you expect every Thanksgiving? A Norman Rockwell Thanksgiving. Family around the table, smiling and peaceful, turkeys cooked perfectly, and food all over the table, and then we're going to have a wonderful meal together, and we're going to clean it all up, and we're going to have just a quiet time of celebration afterwards. We think of Christmas. Christmas is about having a sentimental experience with our family. We're going to bring all together the people that have been with us all year long, that are precious to us. No one would be missing, and that as we gather together, everyone would love their presence. They would be deeply meaningful, and everyone would appreciate them, and we'd have a wonderful time of being together. Or you think of New Year's Eve. What do you want for New Year's Eve? You want to be able to reflect back on the past year, to celebrate all that God has done and all the wonderful things that have happened, and to look hopeful with anticipation to the new year that's coming. And when none of those expectations are met, how do we respond? That's what we want to talk about this morning. So I want you to keep in mind 3 R's. Refocus, recalibrate, respond. Let's say those together. Refocus, recalibrate, respond. You kind of said it. I understand. We're in church. You're not used to speaking out loud. We are in New England. All right? Refocus, recalibrate, respond. That was a slow start. I kind of caught you off guard. So I'm going to have to give you a countdown so you know when to say refocus. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Refocus, recalibrate, respond. Thank you. Let's go back to the story. We're going to look at it from a different perspective, Matthew's Matthew's perspective on what he wrote. Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea during the reign of King Herod. About that time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, "Where's the newborn king of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we've come to worship him." Well, King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. He called the meeting of the leading priests and teachers of the religious law and asked, "Where is the Messiah supposed to be born?" "In Bethlehem of Judea," they said. They just knew that off the top of their heads. Well, for this is what the prophet wrote. "And you, O Bethlehem, and the land of Judea, are not least among the ruling cities of Judah, for a ruler will come from you who will be the shepherd for my people Israel." This is amazing. All that long journey, that onerous government decree, stumbling all that way with a pregnant woman into a crowded city to be able to find a place to stay, was all God's plan. Because God had a promise to keep. A promise that had been given centuries before the birth of Jesus. And all the difficulty that they faced was part of God's plan in order to get them to a place so that Jesus could be born and he would keep his promise, and that would identify who Jesus was and what he came to do. That Jesus would be an unusual leader, a shepherd to the people. Someone who would guide them, someone who would protect them, someone who would provide for them. Sometimes the struggles that we face in our life have a deeper meaning. And what we need to do in order to be able to manage our expectations is to refocus our perspective. Not to focus on the immediate, but to pull our gaze up to the transcendent. You see, as they were walking that long distance, as they were fighting to find a place in order to stay, and as they were worried about giving birth to Jesus in the midst of that, and looking and scrambling for whatever they could find to put their baby in, all that was so that Jesus could be born from Bethlehem. So that the God who keeps his promise could show himself faithful, and they would have the privilege to be a part of that. What an expectation. What a wonderful thing. But here's the thing. In order for you to see the transcendent and not get caught in the imminent, and I'm not saying that the imminent is unreasonable, because maybe your imminent is painful. Maybe it's grief-filled. Maybe it's lonely. Maybe it's chaotic. But your expectations aren't being met. In order to stop and to see something bigger of what God is doing in your life, you need to ask questions. Questions like, where is God in all of this? And what is God doing here? And where are the blessings to be found in that? Important questions. Those questions pull your gaze from what's going on around you to what is going on through you. What God is working out in your life that you'll miss if your perspective is locked on to the imminent. But to rise above. That's what the book is about that I wrote. Is in the midst of this arduous journey of cancer, where is God in the midst of all of this? What is God doing in my life now? Where are those blessings to be found? Here's what I want you to do. I'm going to give you a few seconds. Take a look at those questions. Maybe take a picture of it. What's going on in your life that's hard? What happened that you didn't expect? What's going on that's disappointing to you or frustrating to you? What are the answers to those questions for you? Let God speak to you right now for a second. Use these questions this week. Give yourself an opportunity to let God speak. Pause in the immediate and raise your mind to the transcendent. Let's go back to Mary and Joseph. Because, in their perspective, you could look at that, and what you could focus on is everything that was hard. Everything that we talked about. the long, hard journey, bringing your pregnant wife along that journey, the fear that she might give birth in the midst of this, wondering why God would put you through all this when you've agreed to take on this difficult responsibility for him, and getting in and fighting the crowds and finding the place, and the disappointment of giving birth in this and wishing that it could be better than this. And is this really the memory that we want to have for our family? And oh man, we said we're going to do this for God, and then all of a sudden the baby gets born in a place around animals. I mean, what's that? Is that really God at work in my life? Those are the realities. But there's another perspective. They made it safely through a really difficult journey. Where other people might have stories of thieves and bandits, or disaster on the road, or injury, or maybe, somebody did come along pregnant and they did give birth in the midst of that, and oh my gosh, all the difficulty that went around. They got to Bethlehem safe. In a crowded area where everybody is pushing and pulling and fighting to find a place to stay, they found a safe place. The baby, this is no small thing. If you've ever traveled into a developing nation, it is no small thing. The baby delivered safely, and the mother was alive. That's a big deal, especially in the ancient world. Mary survived, and Jesus survived, because that was on the back of Joseph's mind and Mary's mind. And then shepherds showed up to talk about an angel chorus celebrating the birth of the child that you just delivered. Eventually, Magi would come. In their patience and waiting and just caring for the child, Magi would come to deliver real precious and valuable gifts. And as the story goes on, 8 days after he was born, they went to take him into the temple. They would meet these two people who would just proclaim incredible destiny over the child. It's what I call a both and. It was both really hard, both really dangerous, it was both difficult, and it was marvelous, filled with wonders and answers to prayer. It's the balance of the both and as we examine this. It helps us to recalibrate our emotions, because when the unexpected happens, when what we don't want happens, what we didn't plan happens, when the chaos erupts, when the arguments start, when all of the things that we've expected to happen in our lives, and especially at the holiday season comes, our emotions, boom, right to the surface, right? And they take over your mind, and suddenly you're clouded, and now you're responding in a way that you regret. Or it's hard to see God at work because your emotions are like just erupting in your head. I call it the staticky brain. It's hard to think clearly when all that happens. But you need to take those moments to recalibrate the emotions. And the both and is a practice that I've developed over the years that helped me adapt to the unexpected. Recognizing the difficulties, the hardships, the frustrations, the chaos, and looking for the blessings, the unexpected blessings, the blessings that have always been present that I forget about, the ones that I may take advantage or just disregard, and to breathe. You see it in this. This is out of an ancient letter. This is from a book called Ecclesiastes. Man, talk about a book that applies to our world. It's in our Bible. It's around Psalms. So what do people in this life get in this life for all their hard work and anxiety? Their days of labor are filled with pain and grief, and even at night, their minds can't rest. It's all meaningless. Does this sound like 2022? How hard is your job? Right? All the difficulties of your job. You're just trying to show up and get a job done. And then you get another project thrown at you. Then you have conflict with a fellow employee, or somebody gets sick and you have to do the extra work, or you get called in when you don't want to be called in, and now you have to do the extra, or something goes wrong on the property that you're managing, and now you got to go deal with it at the most inconvenient time, and your job is just hard. Or you feel anxious. Are we going to be able to pay the bills? Are we going to be able to mend the relationships? Are we going to be able to provide for the kids? How are we going to get through with this oil bill? And that anxiety bubbles up, and then what happens? You find yourself at 2 o'clock in the morning, pow, wide awake. And you can't go back to sleep because your mind starts racing and the anxiety builds up. And you know what? It may be totally justified. Now watch what he does. He recognizes the hardships and the anxieties. So I decided. There's a decision to be made. This is the beautiful partnership of your mind with your emotions. we as rational beings have an opportunity to stop and to think. I decided that there's nothing better than to enjoy food and drink and to find satisfaction in work. You know what he did? He recalibrated his emotions. He looked at his table and he's like, my job provides food. My job provides drink. And he looked for the things about his job that he could still enjoy, the things that he could appreciate and find satisfaction. And it's not ignoring the hard things, it's looking for the good things. Because our emotions cloud our vision and we don't see the good things, we see the hard things, right? We get caught in the imminent, and instead it's about pulling back and to look for the blessing that's available and what's been provided to you in a world where people struggle to find work. In a world in which some people like Madagascar survive off of less than $2 a day, in which people literally have day labor jobs in order to provide food for their people. We live in a country where work is available and there's a safety net between nonprofits and the government to help us, looking for the blessing. And then I realized something. See what happens? I get caught in the hardship, the anxiety. I decide to remember the good, the blessing. And then I realized an insight came because I calmed my emotions as I worked with my mind. These are pleasures from the hand of God. For who can eat or enjoy anything apart from him? He got to see God at work through the ordinary because he stopped to breathe, to remember the blessing, and saw God in the midst of it. And from there, he realized God gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy to those who please him. Started with the hard, pulled back, recognized the blessing, found God in the midst of it, and realized, what a good God. It's a little bit of an odd photo for December. Not if you're me. I've been known to grill with snow in my hair. Right? Grilling is an art form and a hobby that I deeply appreciate. But around June of 2021 was a real hard season. The diagnosis of cancer had been there. It was clear that it had come back after the surgery. And I was looking forward that the next month I was going to start medical treatment, and the month after that I was going to do a routine of 38 days of radiation at Brigham and Women's. So I was at the grill. My wife and my 2 sons were inside the kitchen, and I was having a hard moment. The anxiety, the fear, the confusion, a little bit of anger. And then God reminded me, the book is built on 3 questions. And then he reminded me of the third question is, can you find the blessings even in the midst of cancer? So I stopped. Took a couple of deep breaths. Because when you're anxious, you're not breathing. No. Took a few deep breaths. You know what, let's do this at home. You can do this at home. No one's watching you except someone on the couch. Or do it right now. Let's take 3 deep breaths. It relaxes you, doesn't it? Helps the emotions to just diminish a little bit. And so I stopped. We have 5 senses. And I used them. I looked up. It was a beautiful June summer day. I mean, you know that blue summer sky that just seems like it goes on for forever? And I could smell the food on the grill. Food that I was cooking, that we could buy, that was good for my family. And I knew it was going to taste good because I was cooking it. And because I was the grill master, I reached down, and I do what grill masters do. We taste our food. And it tasted really good. It gave me pleasure. And I could touch the meat as it was coming into my mouth. It was hot, it was greasy, and it was wonderful. And in the kitchen, I could hear my wife and boys laughing. And I was blessed. Because I took that moment to breathe. I took that moment to recalibrate my emotions by refocusing my perspective, looking for the blessing that was present. And then something as ordinary as food on a grill, to something as extraordinary as the laughter of my family in the house, to as remarkable as the beauty of the creation that God had delivered. And a soft summer breeze blew over me, and I thought of the Holy Holy Spirit. Calibrating your emotions gives you the ability to navigate your expectations, manage them, and to find the blessing in the moment. So you go back to Mary and Joseph. There's a wonderful sentence at the end of Luke's story about this that I just love. Mary treasured up all these things, and she pondered them in her heart. Mary didn't waste the moment. Mary experienced all that we talked about, both the hardship and the divine. This comes after she had heard from the shepherds what God the Father had delivered to announce the birth of his son, and she held them, she treasured them in her hearts, and she spent her lifetime pondering them. And we know that because Luke wrote this after Jesus died and was resurrected. We believe he got this account from Mary. She spent her lifetime thinking about all that had happened. From that moment when the angel showed up, through the birth experience, through the life of Jesus, at the cross, and then the wonder of an empty tomb and the birth of the church. She took the time to ponder them. Because when our expectations aren't met, we have to choose how we're going to respond. And we have the ability to respond thoughtfully. We don't have to let our emotions take us away as if we're helpless to them. Emotions happen to us. They happen to us for a reason. Emotions are good. But when emotions take us over and when emotions begin to define us, then we've given control of them where we have the ability to respond thoughtfully. Let me show you this. This is from a letter written from prison, by the way, by one of our greats. His name is Paul, like St. Paul, Apostle Paul. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I'll say it again. Rejoice. You've heard me say plenty of times, they don't have the opportunity to make things bold or underline or increase the fonts or make subtitles. So how do they emphasize importance? One of the ways, repetition. They repeat what they said. So rejoice in the Lord always. And I'll say it again. Rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. You know what Paul expected to find in prison? God. You know why Paul expected to find God in prison? Because he found God on a road when he least expected God to show up. He found God as he studied the scriptures and came to understand who Jesus Christ was and what he came to do. He discovered God as he was launched into ministry and he saw miracles and wonders happen around him. He found God when he was beaten up and thrown out of town. He found God when his finances were thin and he wasn't sure what he was going to do. He found God when he set up his business and was able to sell tents and people bought them. He found God in conversations and discussions in unlikely places, in dreams and in visions and in prayer. He had found God. And so when he was in prison, of course, God would be there. The God who is near through all of that is the same God who would be with me right now. And I've come to realize, because I've seen this and experienced this in wonderful ways, I have found God near in a hospital as somebody was dying. I have found God near when I visited someone in the hospital and they weren't dying. I have found God to be near in America, in this room, when we were broadcasting online and home. I found God to be near when I was in developing nations who worship God outside our buildings with just a roof and no walls. I found God to be near when I was in Lebanon and talking to pastors who were navigating a real difficult social situation. I found God to be near. I was walking through refugee camps. I have found God to be near in some of the poorest places in America, and I found God to be near in some of the most beautiful cathedrals I've ever been into in America. Because God is everywhere as well as transcendent. And I've learned in life, you'll find what you expect. So, when we approach Christmas with reasonable expectations, it's easier to center on Christ and find the blessings that are available. One of the reasons that I love Christmas is there are triggers everywhere to think of Christ. It's amazing to me that you could be in a store and it still happens, a Christmas carol comes over the speakers. It's amazing you could be going through the radio. Some people still use that. It's amazing that in streaming services I can find all that I want, playlists that were made for Christians that contain Christmas carols by Amazon. I can tell Alexa to do it. Alexa does. It's amazing that when I drive through and I see the beauty of the lights and the wonder of the trees, I know what they symbolize. It's amazing that I get to sit in my house, the beauty of the decorations around me, and I can read an Advent devotional about the arrival of Jesus in safety in my own home, and I can find Jesus. It's really about, what are you expecting to happen this Christmas? And how will you manage your expectations so you can find the blessing, even in the midst of the hardest of moments? And then recenter yourself on Jesus. Our 3 words, ready? 1, 2, 3. Refocus, recalibrate, respond. I'm going to give you 1 minute. And here's what I'd like you to do. Which one of those spoke to you? Because I know one of those words, one of those thoughts spoke to you. Refocus your perspective, recalibrate your emotions, respond thoughtfully. Go. Just, what will you do with it? Lord, we make ourselves available to you. Our minds focused on you. We surrender our emotions to you. We ask you to lift our perspective from the immanent to the transcendent. And may we find the blessings that are available to us. Help us, Father, as we navigate this week. Help us to not just arrive out of chaos and disorganized and just disjointed into a Christmas Eve service, but help us to arrive expecting you and the wonder of your presence in our midst when we gather to celebrate the birth of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.